Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Eden Road podcast, where on today's show we're going to be reflecting on Brentford's 1-0 draw, snooze fest, ball fest, call it what you like. I've just watched the match of the day highlights and the reel has never been shorter. Craig, how are we?
Yeah, tired, mate. This is an early one for us, this.
Yeah, we're recording at 10:30 Sunday morning. I thought we'd get the reaction out nice, fresh and early. Dan, how are you?
All good, mate. Let's get this one out of the way.
Yeah, let's do it. Before we get going, just remember to comment down below, subscribe to the YouTube and Spotify channels, and also give us a follow on our socials at the Ealing Road on Twitter, at Ealing Road Pod on Instagram. Tweet of the week, we've got a few this week. So there is a Brentford group chat, and the people that listen to this podcast who are in that Brentford group chat will know about some of the stinky takes that frequently occur when Brentford either get beat or kind of succumb to a disappointing 1-0 draw at home, which is what happened yesterday. Tom in that group chat, I'm not going to give his second name just because I think it was a heat of the moment kind of just typing rage tweet. He said, I would rip up KLP's contract and kick him onto the middle of the Great West Road. We spoke about it off camera, Dan, and we're going to get into it in the podcast about KLP's performance yesterday. But it just goes to show that I do think, Dan, sometimes Brentford fans are watching different games, because I actually thought KLP was one of our better players yesterday.
I thought he did play well, and it's nice to see him not a wing back again. So he's, he can more able to express himself. And obviously, it's not easy as a attacking player playing more in the defensive line and having to worry about, going the other way as well as what you're good at attacking. And I thought, he wasn't afraid of taking men on. I think there's a couple of periods in the first half, especially where, he happily was, taking on the back line for West Ham. And I probably thought he had a better game than Sharda. And I think Thomas Frank probably agreed, because, Sharda got pulled off and KLP stayed on.
Well, we don't know that Sharda could be injured because he went down a little bit before he got taken off. So we're going to talk about injuries now. But you're absolutely right. And especially because KLP was up against Wan-Bissaka, who many people say is like one of the best 1v1 defenders in the league. And I actually thought that he gave him a pretty torrid time, especially in that first half. His ball retention in tight situations is really good. But anyway, proper tweet of the week. This I'm going to hand over to Craig for, because Craig tweeted out yesterday Brentford's extensive injury list. Craig, over to you, mate.
Yes. Now we are 6 games into this season.
Yes.
Our injury list contains 8 players. Now, what I will say is some of these players obviously we didn't expect to play at the start of this season, given Rico Henry and Aaron Hickey being part of that list as well, and Josh Da Silva being on there. But we got the 2 defenders. So we've got Aaron Hickey, Rico Henry, who we've got out now. Then we've got 3 midfielders: Christian Norgard, Matty Jensen, and Josh Da Silva. Again, Josh Da Silva is one that we didn't really expect to see at the start of the season. So we're already on 5. Now we've got 3 forward players out, 2 of which we haven't even seen in the Premier League yet, in Igor Thiago and Gustavo Nunes. And as of last week, Johan Wissa as well, which leaves us on 8 players out. And Kevin Sharda hobbled off the pitch as well. So we don't know how much further that list is going to go on to. But I think that it kind of it feels like it points out the frailties that we had going into this season with the injury numbers that we had, given we didn't have Aaron Hickey, we didn't have Rico Henry, we didn't have Josh Da Silva, we didn't have Igor Thiago before the start of the season, and we knew that plenty of time in advance as well. I mean, that was the day of the Benfica game that we found out that he was out injured, and it feels like we've kind of left ourselves in a bit of a sticky situation here, given the number of players that we've got out, and we're not even in October yet.
I know. The thing is, we spoke about it sort of towards the back end of last season about how the amount of injuries that we had last year was kind of unprecedented. And then we're kind of 5-6 games into the new season, and it's just still looking a bit grim. But Dan, like in the transfer window, I think we all agreed sort of we didn't go for the full-backed area, and that was probably a miss sight. But just, did you anticipate there being sort of 8 players who probably would be in contention to start? All of them, you would say, probably?
Well, after last season, I wouldn't have ruled anything out. But it is either very unfortunate or there is something behind the scenes that we could be doing better. Because even when they are out, in terms of getting them back, they always seem to overrun the timescales that are initially set for them, which is a bit concerning. I think, to be honest, the fullback issue, I think Ayer and Vandenberg yesterday, covered quite well. And I am more surprised that we don't necessarily miss a left back or a right back as much as we did last season when we had this problem. So we've obviously worked on it and we've got a solution somehow, even if it's not, via someone new coming through the door. I think the main issue is probably the lack of depth on the bench. Like, you look at that bench yesterday, and I felt for Thomas Frank a bit, because obviously he wants to change the game, especially when West Ham are getting on top, especially just around the time when they scored. And the only one he could have really brought on was Yarmo. And even Yarmo has, quite limited first team experience. He's never scored a goal for the club. The only two people that scored for us all season are Brian Mbeumo and Johan Wissa in the league. So it's very difficult in terms of how does he change that game? Because I don't look at any of those substitutes and say that they're necessarily ready for Premier League football, and that's nothing on them, or that they can, really come in and take this game by the scruff of the neck and turn it our way. And, it's very unfortunate and quite unlike Thomas Frank as well to only use 2 of his 5 subs, but he's been put in that position by the injuries we have. And obviously it's concerning when, people like Christian Norgard, Thomas Frank in his press conferences, likes to say that, he's very, very close, just about missed out on Spurs last week, probably be back this week, and obviously doesn't turn out to be. So we don't really know how serious these injuries are. And obviously that's a bit of a concern as well as to how long it's going to be before some of these come back.
Yeah, it's the Thomas Frank pre-match press conferences. I think whatever he says about injuries, you do have to take with a pinch of salt, because, where is Rico Henry? Where is he? Genuinely, where the hell is he? But injury situation looking unrelentingly grim at the moment, as it was last year. It's just kind of a continuation of that. The only positive, I guess, is that, Gustavo Nunes, we could see him soon. Rico Henry, we hope to see him soon. Norgard, we hope to see him soon. You'd imagine those ones are the kind of shorter scale injuries, whereas the other ones are a bit more long term. But anyway, shout out another tweet of the week, regular Super Bees, for suggesting that Frank Onyeka would have been the solution yesterday. The less said about that, I think, the better. Craig, coming straight to you for full-time thoughts just on the game.
The most important thing to point out is a new record that we've set.
Yeah.
The first ever club to score 3 goals in the first minute in 3 consecutive games. So Thomas Frank's kickoff routines are working wonders at the moment. So we'll see. Congratulations to Thomas Frank and the team for setting another record after their one last week, being the first team to score inside 30 seconds in 2 consecutive games. And then nothing else kind of really happened, did it? We created a couple of chances throughout the games, but up until maybe they equalised, it didn't feel like we was really pressing them for a second. Personally, it didn't feel like we was pushing them for another goal up until the point that they scored, and we kind of had to go for it. It looked like we was just going to try and sit back and play from the play out from the back line. That low block even. And try and just catch them on the counter when we got the opportunity. But I mean, we was 5 minutes into the second half. The ball gets cleared to their goalie, and we're still dawdling out of our own penalty box. And it just shows that there was no real intent to kind of put them to the sword. Which, if we'd have done, we'd have scored 2 or 3 more easily. That was just they seemed shaky, they seemed rocky, but we let them have the ball, we let them press us up until they scored. And there was a couple of contentious penalty shouts, one of which I thought was a dead cert, which we didn't get, and the other one not so much. But I suppose the biggest takeaway is it's another point on the board. It's another home game in which we haven't lost, and that was the key at the start of the season. We said we've got to win our home games, but if we just don't lose our home games as well, it's points on the board with the away games that we've had. So, positives to be taken. Quick start again, another Brian Mbeumo goal, and that's kind of the end of that.
Dan, over to you, mate.
Well, it doesn't do our points lost from winning positions stat any good for this season, does it? Obviously, we've scored those three quick goals, but haven't won any of the games. And perhaps this is the most disappointing one that we didn't kick on from after doing it again. Yeah, I think Craig summed it up. It was an okay game. It obviously could have been better. It also probably could have been worse. I thought, again, we just have periods in games where we just don't control them well enough. I know we are trying to control games more this season. Our possession stats are probably higher in each game than they were in the same games last season. But we need to be good at it for 90 minutes. We can't afford to switch off for a period of 10, 15 minutes because that's when we get punished. And obviously, the goal we conceded was very sloppy in terms of the ball just bouncing around the box. And we know we don't like this one. Someone's got to take charge in those situations and get the ball clear. It was an okay game. I'm pleased he started with the back four that he started with. I'm pleased that he went with Vandenberg and Ayer. And I'm pleased he went with all the attacking players he started with. But obviously, I don't see any of them really as goal scorers at the moment, apart from Brian, which is a concern. We can't just be relying on him until Wissa's back. And yeah, obviously, it left us with nothing on the bench, really, because we started all those attacking players. So we couldn't bring any of them on after an hour or so. So it's like I said, I feel a bit for Thomas Frank because there was not too much he could do, I don't think, to change that game yesterday.
You both touched on the fast start, and obviously Brian deserves his flowers because he just that finish. He's got it down to a T. Brian volleys in the box. You just know where they're going. Are we having kickoffs as set pieces? I've got this in the running order just because.
Yeah.
Is it a set piece? Are we having that as a set piece? Okay, right. Keith Andrews is showing his worth. It's 3 games on the trot, as you mentioned, Craig. First team in Premier League history to score. But also, as you mentioned, the response after the goal, it was frustrating to see us kind of take the foot off the gas, and West Ham had a lot of the ball, and then basically nothing else happened in that first half. Genuinely nothing. We just kind of sat back. We looked a little bit threatening on the break sometimes, but I just want to go straight to the goal from West Ham in the second half. Because it kind of sparked us into life. But also, I think the defending, having watched it back, Craig, Antonio in the box, he's not someone that you kind of are scared to make a movement on because he's not like the most nimble and the most agile. He's not like a Ben Rama or a Carvalho nipping around the box where you're kind of scared to put a foot in. For me, Craig, I think either one of Sepp or Collins has to come across and make a challenge a bit earlier.
I mean, I feel like the ideal part would be to stop the ball coming into the box in the first place. You know, we just kind of left them, like I said, we let them have the ball. We let them have so much time and possession that eventually something was going to break to the point that it did, you know, and it was such a poor goal to concede because even though we let them have the ball, they never looked like scoring.
Yeah.
Even though we let them have the ball, they never looked like scoring until we gifted them a goal. And we gifted them a goal with poor defending because no one, like you said, just took charge. And we had chances to clear it. But, you know, these are like half-hearted attempts to get the ball away from the penalty area, which is unlike us. Normally when we're defending, we get the ball away from goal as quickly as we can. And we did it actually a few times in this game. Playing out from the back is where we normally, you know, maybe don't get the ball out as quickly as we like. And we spoke about it after the Spurs game, especially considering how quickly they closed us down. And yesterday, I felt like we did that well. When we were playing out from the back, we did it well. We got it out wide and we got it moving quickly. But when we was being attacked, it felt like we was just a bit too, like I say, half-hearted in getting the ball gone. We wasn't quick enough. We wasn't, you know, ready to be attacked. It felt like we just kind of let them do it. So it was poor defending. No one took charge, and it was a hugely preventable goal.
Dan, when West Ham score and we then come back into the game and we do look miles better, as Craig's mentioned, we leave ourselves half an hour to try and get a quality chance. We didn't have one in the last half an hour of the game. But it does, looking back on it now, it's like, well, if we have it in our locker to have the ball in West Ham's half comfortably and knock it around from wing to wing and get KLP involved and get Schade involved, why didn't we do it from the off when we scored in the first minute and then we sit back? It just makes it a little bit more frustrating, doesn't it? Because we were better than West Ham. Like, I don't think West Ham fans will come out of the game saying that they probably were the better team. Each side of the goal, you could argue that Brentford should have and could have really affected the game and gone for it.
Yeah, I just don't know if we're good enough to play that way successfully for 90 minutes yet. And I certainly don't think Thomas Frank intended or told the team to set up so that if we go ahead in the first minute, we then sit back on it, because it's a very long time to sit back on that lead. I thought West Ham probably defended much better than I thought they would. We didn't really create anything of note, to be honest, and it's frustrating. I think this is still probably the early stages of just adapting our style a bit, and there's certain players that on the ball perhaps aren't as good as we need them to be, and when we can get better players on the ball in the team, then we might see that improve. Obviously, when we can affect the game from the bench, we can see that improve. Obviously, we saw West Ham freshening up their team. They made a tweak at half-time as well, which seemed to work. And obviously, they were able to make those adjustments and tweaks. And obviously, we weren't really able to do that. And I think that probably had a big impact, especially on the early part of the second half leading up to their goal.
What do we make of the penalty shouts, Craig? I think we spoke before we started recording about the Janelt one quite late on, which I think we've all kind of agreed wasn't a pen. But you spotted something on Pinnock.
Yeah, so there was two kind of real big penalty shouts, wasn't there? Especially from the West End, and it was the Pinnock one and then the Janelt one, which you just mentioned that we spoke about. The Janelt one looked inconspicuous. It kind of just looked like there was feet flying around and he's hit the deck and stayed down. No one really knew what happened, but if you don't shout for it, you don't get it, And that's football fans, isn't it? Anything that happens in and around the penalty area, you're going to scream for it. But anyone sort of in the West Stand and the West Stand side blocks of the North and South stands would have seen very clearly. I don't know which defender it was. I think it might be Mavropanos. Had a hold of Ethan Pinnock, and it was very clear that he had a hold of Ethan Pinnock. So I'm in the West End, left side of the goal, so the goal is down on my right, and the incident happened in the right side of that penalty area, where the ball's come over and the two players are tossing in for the ball as you would expect, but Pinnock gets away from the defender, and it was pretty obvious that he had a hold of his shirt. He was very clearly tugging onto Pinnock's shirt. And I guess maybe they're going to say the ball was too far away from him or it wasn't preventing him from getting to the ball. But it was very, very clearly a tug on the shirt. And, 99 times out of 100, you see that given as a penalty. What I will say is it happened in the Liverpool game, Yes, yesterday evening. And Liverpool got the penalty for it. So what we're saying here again is, where's the consistency from the referees, and how does VAR look at that as a player with a handful of another player's shirt and not give it? I'm kind of lost for words with that one. It seemed so obviously a penalty, but we didn't get it.
Especially because in the game, if that game was going to be decided by anything, it probably would have been a penalty, just because there were no clear-cut opportunities whatsoever. So it just does make it that little bit more frustrating. But I'm glad Callum wasn't on for that rant, because I think it would have lasted about 5 minutes more than that just did, Craig.
Yeah.
But I think, to be honest, in terms of match action, that's about it. Should we talk a little bit about the players? We've spoken briefly about KLP. I think he it's certainly in my eyes had a good game. He looked tidy. He just needs to get a goal, or just he's got a couple of assists, Dan, but I just feel like he really does need that goal just to kind of kick on his season, because he is a really tidy player. And like we mentioned, having Wan-Bissaka as your defender and getting the better of him a number of times that's no mean feat, and he just needs that goal, I think, Dan.
Yeah, we've been here before with him and with Sharda in terms of saying that they need a goal to kickstart their season. And like I've said with KLP, I don't think that Thomas Frank has really helped him in terms of where he's been playing in a lot of the games he's been featuring in. I think in a front three, you know, he can express himself more. And I do think goals will come. I think, you know, he obviously needs to add more of them to his game, as do all of the attacking players with Wissa out, because we're not going to be playing with a natural striker now for the next couple of months. So they all need to chip in, really. Yeah, like I said, I thought he played better than Sharda. I thought Sharda struggled a little bit. I thought just his touch is just a bit off and he's always chasing it. And if he wins anything, it's normally just because he's so quick and he might get a corner out of it because the defender's a bit panicked as to how quick he is. I think with him more so, I'd say he probably more needs a goal than KLP. I think with KLP, I'm seeing really positive signs in terms of what he can do. He's not afraid to take anybody on. So he doesn't necessarily look like he's really struggling with confidence. I think any attacking player is obviously going to need goals. And those two, hopefully they can be fit for the whole season. Obviously, like we said, we don't know about Sharda after he limped off, but we just need them to have a whole season with the club and see where they are towards the end of the season, because, you know, for as long as they've been with us so far, they've, you know, had significant periods out, and, you know, that takes your progress back. And, you know, to really get into a rhythm, you need regular games. And, you know, hopefully we'll play more front threes and back fours in our coming games. Now we've got some of the tough away games out the way, so we can see him in that front three and we can see him start to thrive, hopefully.
I was more saying...
Sorry, mate. I have one issue with KLP. Only one. I think he's a fantastic player. And like you said, when he's got like a 1v1 situation, he does really well to beat his player. And in the opposite way to what Kevin Sharda is, I think that Keane's first touch always helps him. It's always moving forward. It's always progressive. So that a couple of times the ball comes over to him and his first touch knocks it past the defender. Then once he knocks it past the defender, this is where my one issue with him is. And so many people are going to disagree, but a lot of people will agree as well, is Keane's lack of directness kills me. His lack of directness kills me. He'll be on the left side of the pitch because he's playing left wing, beats the player, beats Wan-Bissaka, and all he has to do is, we spoke about this last season. All he has to do is make a beeline towards goal, because if he can run across the front of his player, that player is going to either have to slow down and back off and let him run in front, or foul him and possibly get sent off in a situation in which he's already beaten the player because he's going to be the last man. But he doesn't do that. I don't know why Keane has such intent on running down wings when he's beaten a player. He never makes a direct run towards goal. And he had a few chances yesterday where he's beaten his fullback and then just run down the line. Now, I get it's because he's a wide player and that's what he does. But when he beats his player, if he makes a direct run towards goal and he's in front of his defender, like I said, there are two scenarios. There are two outcomes, really, aren't there? The defender has to slow down in case of making a foul on him, or he makes the foul on him and he wins a free kick in a dangerous area. But he has a lack of directness. And that's not saying he's not good at what he does, because he very clearly is good at what he does. But he needs to be more direct in his play when he beats his defender to create the chances for himself to score as well, rather than just, you know, creating opportunities for everyone else. That's my one issue with him.
It's weird as well, because you would think, because he's right-footed as well, he would have more of a propensity to cut in and go towards the goal as opposed to go down the line. But I didn't mean, Dan, in terms of like his confidence that he needs a goal, but just in terms of his output, like he needs to score more goals. Just like, because he's not, you can tell he's not low on confidence. He just needs to score. Like that's something that he needs to add to his game, because he scored a bucket load of goals for Hull. And it's been a couple of seasons now, and we've not seen him score many goals at all. I think, what was his tally, like two or three he scored in Brentford shirt? He scored one against Villa, a couple in the cup, but like it's nowhere near enough for the player that we bought and the money that we spent. We're expecting now to be seeing a little bit of just more attacking returns. I thought someone else that impressed me yesterday was Fabio, Dan. He's got this weird thing where he'll give the ball away, but he's really good at winning it back. Like his counter press is really good. I've noticed that about him, but I think he's taken along quite nicely. I know you've got some sort of question marks about where he actually fits into our team going forward when we've got players back, but I do think he's quite a tidy player. What have you made of him? What did you make of him yesterday?
Well, the way we played yesterday, we did almost kind of have a number 10. The front four played very high, and there were four of them. Obviously, normally we have the front three, and then we have more three deeper midfielders. So I can see how he fits in that situation. It's just something Thomas Frank hadn't really tried before. So yeah, I can see that. I think in tight areas, he's really good. Like he'll just knock it to someone like KLP, receive a quick 1-2, and get round a man really easily like that. And I noticed that last week and again this week. I think his touches and his little skills and little intricate bits are really, really good. Again, from him, especially if he's kind of going to be playing down the middle, we do want to see him start to get a few goals to try to replace Wissa. Obviously, I don't think he's ever going to score as many as Wissa would in that position. But we do need him to start contributing as well, so the load isn't just on Brian. But yeah, it's positive signs. You can see him growing into it, and obviously we've got to remember with him, he's not really played that much in the Premier League. He's played more in the Championship. So, he's still probably learning a bit about the level and stepping up. But, he's a young player. He can get a lot better. And I always think when we bring people in like him, if we think about where Brian was when he arrived, I think these players are probably at a higher level than perhaps Brian when he first arrived. So, in a few years' time, if he can follow the same sort of path, then, we could have a brilliant player in our hands.
Let's talk about the bench just a little bit, and then we'll quickly do a brief preview of Wolves. Craig, Yarmo and Konak came on. I've seen people saying Konak's not Premier League ready yet. Has Yarmo come on as much as we'd have hoped for? Me and Dan were chatting before we started recording about sort of, when he came into the team a couple of seasons ago, we were all raving about him because, last season it would have been, but we were all raving about him and his potential. And we've seen him multiple times since then. He's very tidy on the ball, similar to Fabio. But have we seen as much from him as we'd have hoped for when he first kind of burst onto the scene, if I want to go full Micah Richards?
It's a difficult one to say that, isn't it? Because in a fully fit midfield, he doesn't get very many minutes, if we get to play Norgard, Jensen, Damsgaard, Janelt's then the next successor in line for Janelt. For Norgard, Fab can come in for Damsgaard. When Josh Da Silva comes back, does that push Yarmo further down the pecking order? It's a difficult one. I want to say yes and I want to say no, because when I see him on the pitch, I do think he's fantastic, and I do think that we've definitely got a prospect on our hands for the next sort of coming seasons. Like we said at this transfer window that we was building more for the future than we was building for the current because of the players that we brought in. No, because we all want to see more of him. We all actually want to see more of him because we all think he's a very good player, and we like what we see when he's on the ball. But because of the players that we have and the lineup in which we would go with on a fully fit day, he doesn't make that lineup, but he will. Let's be honest. Norgard's not going to be, I don't think, very much longer around in the team. Personally, I wouldn't be surprised if we see. Well, maybe like Jensen's been here for what, 4 years now as well.
Since the Championship,
he might want to move on as well. Norgard's just unfortunately had loads of injury problems. That's why I said that. Norgard's had a lot of injury problems. That's why I said that. But I do think that we have a proper talent and prospect on our hands. We will see more of him over the coming seasons. So give him time to bed in, get him some more regular minutes, and we will see the player that we're all hyping up. Yeah,
I'm just at the moment when he comes on, he's being asked to impact a game, and I'm not really sure if he's an impact player. No. And like you said, he at the moment, if we've got a fully fit midfield, he's behind Jensen, he's behind Norgard, he's behind Janelt, he's behind possibly Da Silva. So it's just a lot for him to kind of come on in a game like that when not a lot has happened and influence it. It's just, he doesn't look the best. But anyway, I think the less said about that game, the better, because it was so boring. But anyway, let's move on to Wolves. Dan, I'm a little bit worried for this game. I can't lie, especially because of what happened last season when we played Wolves in the Prem around the same time-ish. But, Wolves have had the hardest start in the Premier League, according to Opta, in terms of their games that they've played against the teams that they played against. And they played well against Liverpool, I thought. I don't know if you watched the game last night, but I did think they were quite good against Liverpool. It just seems like a game where we come into it off the back of a disappointing home draw against West Ham, and the options on the bench, they're dithering a little bit. I don't know. How are you feeling ahead of it, Dan?
I think from their perspective, although they played well last night, obviously they didn't get any points, and although they've had the hardest start, which I agree with, at some point in the players' minds and in the fans' minds, you get more and more desperate for that first win in the season. And no matter who you've been playing so far, it might start to knock your confidence as to whether, you're going to really be struggling this season. So they will be getting to that point soon. I suspect if we beat them, they will be starting to get to that point, because they will probably see us as a game that, potential opportunity for them. I expect us to set up in probably a similar way to what we did yesterday. I don't see why we can't be confident. I think we've still been generally good this season. Of course, the lack of depth is a concern. If we pick up another injury or two this week, then you really struggle with who's actually going to be starting next week, because I'm not sure any of those on the bench yesterday are particularly ready. So that's the concern. I hope that we put performances like Wolves at home behind us. We've not had a stinker like that this season. So I really hope that Nathan Collins remembers which team he's playing for out of the two. But there's no reason why we can't be confident. But yeah, I do understand that, it's a bit concerning with all these injuries. And obviously we can hope the likes of Norgard might be back. But I think from a Wolves perspective too, I think they're kind of a team that I think are slowly just declining a little bit. I feel like in a lot of the transfer windows, they're getting rid of some of their top players and not really replacing them to the same standard. Obviously, a couple of years ago, they lost the likes of Ruben Neves, and I don't think they ever really replaced him. Nunez, who went to City as well. And obviously this summer, they've lost Kilman, who obviously went to West Ham. So I think quality of their squad-wise, they're probably not too confident either. So, we'll see. But again, at home against these kind of teams, we've got to go in with some confidence based on how we've played so far this season.
Craig, thoughts out of Wolves?
If Kevin Schade is out for this game, what formation do we play? Because we don't have three forwards to play.
I don't.
Unless
I'd imagine it'd go to or like a 4-4-2, maybe potentially, but like out of possession, stick as in possession 4-4-2.
The only way
Carvalho false nine.
The only way
Carvalho false nine.
We would do it is if we kind of went for a narrow sort of formation, in like a 4-3-2-1, for example. So I'm slightly worried based on the injuries that we've got and what team we could put out, because we know that Brian can be very impactful out wide or through the middle. We know that Keane can be very impactful out wide. We haven't really seen him. We haven't ever seen him through the middle, so we don't know that one. Fab, we've seen him play now a few times, and we kind of all seem to agree that he's works better as a 10. He kind of in and around it where he can win the ball back, like you said, Mike, and play in and around players. But we don't have a striker, really, do we? We don't have a striker. We've got Brian, who's scoring all the goals, which is what a striker does. But we don't have an out and out striker for this game. When we didn't have one for the West Ham game, really, unless you consider Schade as an out and out striker, which in the post Spurs we said he's not we said he's not
No.
an out-and-out striker. So, oh God, I don't know. I really don't know. I agree with Dan. I hope that we put last year's performance behind us, and Nathan Collins remembers what colour shirt he's wearing this time around. But I think that we have to capitalise on the poor start to the season that Wolves have had, and we need a bounce-back performance. You know what? Saying that, we didn't play badly yesterday.
No, we didn't.
We just didn't. We didn't light the world on fire. Do you know what I mean? We didn't.
Yeah.
We didn't have that spark in which we needed. But we need a little bit of something in this game.
Yeah.
So we just need a little bit of something, and if we can find that little bit of something, then I'm confident that we'll keep the 3 points in West London.
Chaps, I think that'd be a good point to round things off. The Ealing Road podcast will be back in the week for a full Wolves preview, so keep your eyes peeled for that. Remember to drop a comment down below. What did you think of the West Ham game? What's going on with the injury crisis? Where's Rico Henry? Let us know in the comment section down below. Subscribe to the YouTube and Spotify channels. Give us a follow on our socials as well, at the Ealing Road on Twitter, at Ealing Road Pod on Instagram. Apologies if that podcast was sort of not as exciting or not as many laughs as it normally is, but when there's a game like that, it's difficult to kind of get up for it, as it were. But as always, Dan, Craig, pleasure.
Up the bees.
Up the bees.
There you go.